Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick Expert Reviews, Easter Holiday Special, Samsung Galaxy Tab S9, the flagship model from 2 years ago, and the recently released Samsung Galaxy Tab S10 FE. So while they might look quite similar with this S9 in my hand right now, there are some differences. So first of all, you've got 11-inch OLED, dynamic OLED panel with 120 Hz refresh rate, while on the S10, which I've got now in my hands, you have a 10.9 IPS LCD display with 90 Hz refresh rate. You also get 4 speakers on the S9, while you only get 2 stereo speakers on the S10. You also get an on-display fingerprint sensor on the S9, as you can see, and there is one on the power button on the S10 FE. So as you can see, there are quite a few differences. You do get an S Pen in both devices, in both boxes actually, for both devices. However, the one for the S9 is waterproof just like the tablet, plus also has a Bluetooth support, while the one in the S10 FE is not waterproof. However, the tablet itself is. So I'm going to start with 3D Mark benchmarks. Now, I've tried to run Slingshot. However, as you can see, I'm being told by 3D Mark that the benchmark is actually too powerful for the S9, which is a 2-year-old device, but with a more powerful Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. While the Exynos 1580 in the Tab S10 FE can run Slingshot benchmark just fine, but I wanted to run something that the S9 FE isn't an overkill for. So we're gonna start with the wildlife benchmark. And yeah, as you can see, the benchmark has actually loaded faster on the S9. I've tried to time it, so obviously the picture is the same, but I couldn't because the S9 each time has launched the benchmark faster than the S10 FE. Also, do bear in mind the S9 model I've got on the very top is a 256 gig model, which has 12 gigs of RAM, while the S10 FE is 128 gig model with 8 gigs of RAM. Now, if you do decide to go for the 256 gig model, you do get upgraded RAM to 12 gigs on the S10 FE as well. But to be honest, the wildlife benchmark isn't about RAM, it's about the CPU, GPU, which you have in both tablets. And as you can see, the S9 absolutely decimates the S10 FE. Obviously, if you're not into heavy gaming, that's not going to matter that much to you because, for example, Call of Duty Mobile or Company of Heroes, very demanding games, run on both. But as you can see on the S9, the score, you don't actually get a score. It just says maxed out, which I've never seen before, to be honest. And the S10 FE scores 4,500, I believe, 50 points. As you can see, frame rate 42 to 106 frames per second and 16 up to 38 on the S10 FE. So the next benchmark is called Geekbench 6, and basically it simulates and runs a benchmark that measures day-to-day usage of your tablet. So for example, compressing a file or a group of files or running a navigation and stuff like that. At the beginning, there isn't much difference between the two, the S10 FE being on the bottom and the S9 being on the top. However, it will change very soon. So don't get me wrong, the S10 FE is not a bad device by any stretch of imagination and in any shape or form. It is a good, powerful tablet, and it doesn't mean that when you get a lower score, I don't know, you can't compress files or you can't export 4K videos or anything like that. No, you can edit it on both devices. However, it's gonna happen faster on the S9, which is on the top. And as you can see, yes, I did speed up the video a bit, so you know you are not bored to death because I do value your time. But it also shows that the S10 FE is still running while the S9 has finished. And as you can see, numbers are spit out at the very end for both the single core and the multi-core performance. Now, higher does mean better, but like I did say, it doesn't mean that the S10 FE cannot handle tasks like the S9. It's just that the S9 will handle those tasks faster with less lag and so on. Now, it also is quite important because the S9 is a 2-year-old device, but with a definitely way more powerful Snapdragon 8 Generation 2. Both are done in 4nm process. However, the Exynos 1580 in the S10 FE, as you can see, is generally slower than the Snapdragon in the S9 itself. So both single core and multi-core performance. As you can see, you've got a comparison with different devices running different CPUs as well. Now, the next step I wanted to compare is the screens. Well, next step, the next thing I want to compare are the screens. So you've got the OLED panel at the very top and the IPS LCD display on the bottom. Now, as you can see, unfortunately, one of the weirdest YouTube updates have introduced those gray bars at the very top and the bottom, but you can see the main difference between these two devices in the grays and the blacks. Obviously, on the OLED panel at the top, it is definitely darker gray bar. Saying that, I have to admit that the panel used in the S10 FE is good enough. As you can see, the colors are quite punchy. They are both in vivid modes, but they are quite punchy. So to be honest, I wouldn't complain as such, but a OLED panel is a definitely better panel. And the next thing I want to cover is gaming. Now, word of caution, the tabs are swapped. So the S10 FE is now on the top while the S9 is on the bottom, purely because it's taken out of my S10 FE review, which I've put the link in the video description below if you're interested in the full review of the S10 FE. Saying that, I've chosen Company of Heroes purely because it's a very taxing, very demanding game on any of mobile devices. And as you can see, there is a difference in graphics on the S10 FE on the top and the S9 on the bottom, apart from obviously screen quality as well, being OLED on the bottom and IPS on the top. However, you can obviously play Minecraft, Call of Duty Mobile, PUBG Mobile on the S10 FE as well. However, Company of Heroes is very taxing, very demanding game for both CPU and GPU. It actually does crash quite a lot on the powered devices, while it doesn't happen on the S10 FE, which is good news. And the last thing I wanted to cover is the external display support, or lack of thereof, because the S10 FE, while it supports USB on the go, which as you can see, I've got my keyboard and mouse connected and I can use built-in DeX. Unfortunately, there is no screen on the external screen. And now I've plugged in my S9, and as you can see, you do get full external display support. You can actually mirror it as well, but I do prefer to use the S9 as a big touchpad. So yeah, thanks for watching another episode of Quick Expert Reviews. Take care.